I'm going to start by reading one of the shorter stories in my collection. It's called Like Air or Bread or Hard Apple Candy. At the corner of Palm and Flamingo, there is no sand or coconut-scented suntan lotion. There are no roof decks or boats waiting to be scraped and to return to sea. At the corner of Palm and Flamingo, there's not even the hope of an alligator float, duct tape doctored, waiting to hold a fat-legged child. There's no sign showing the shortest route to the ocean is a whopping 227 miles, though Grenada had calculated it when she was a girl, asking Grandma why come their neighborhood had names like they was in Florida. Grandma's speech on the importance of names hooked there forever in the soft spot behind her ear. There are, however, a good deal of lawn ornaments at the corner of Palm and Flamingo. Worn out roosters and a jockey who may have been black once, tipped over next to a bird bath holding nothing but a pancake-sized circle of rainwater. It's old folks who live there, but Grenada doesn't see them much anymore. Used to be when she was out with Petunia, her 70-pound pit bull. She'd see them popping the front door open, both pushing walkers, moving the way octogenarians do, as though the whole world might give way beneath them. It must have taken them an hour to get to the car. She thought about helping, but the dog, you see. People were funny about bully breeds. Petunia tests Grenada's strength, pulls so hard her shoulder burns. Lord in heaven, she knows she probably should have gotten one of those little dogs you can scoop up into a sack and throw on your shoulder like nothing, like air or bread or hard apple candy, a tall boy and a bottle of vodka. Not that she was thinking about those things. Not anymore. The truth is, she doesn't see too many of the people she remembers from the neighborhood. More moneyed people had started buying houses on Seaside and Sand Dune. She wonders what it means to walk past what used to be her great uncle's property and witness hulking machines smash in windows she used to gaze out of, particularly the one above the kitchen sink where her aunt kept a lucky ceramic pig on the sill, where she'd pulled herself up and climbed over and cradled the little thing with the smiling pig face. What did it mean that she'd called it Petunia too, and now the closest thing she'll ever have to a daughter peed on the lawn in front of the demolition? Grenada takes a big breath, the microscopic debris catching the rustle of autumn wind, leaves dry and brittle and caramel sweet, and wonders if she's taking in the last physical remnants of her long dead relatives. A fragment of hair, a skin cell, some crumb of biscuit hidden under the fridge, never gathered, never cleaned, never consumed until now. But Petunia doesn't overanalyze. She follows the scent of some unknown creature, pulling Grenada away and up the hill until the only thing left for her to feel is the tingling of her thighs. And that's the end of the story.
So wait, am I on? Are we good?
I think we're good. Yep. I think we can
What
start
is it with me and technology? I'm just wowed by Beth. You could read to me all day long and I would be happy because I read your work and like I've read Deadheading a couple of times now since you sent it to me way back when, and there is absolutely nothing like hearing you read it out loud. You do this thing that I do as well when you get to certain words or certain phrases and your accent really comes out.
No, right?
And it just, I don't know, it just makes me happy.
It's not always, I mean, it's not really planned. It's like something just twitches and there we go. There, that just came out real Southern.
My students used to say that they knew that they were like in trouble, like they were getting mad, because then my accent would come out. Like I would be all like, everything would be normal. And the next thing it'd be like, sit your butt down. And like suddenly it would come out and they'd be like, whoa, Miss Post.
It's amazing. I've had the same feedback. It's my mama. I blame it on her.
Exactly. No, same thing. Well, you know, actually that kind of, again, not to be the teacher student, but I'm sitting here like taking, you probably can't see that because lighting is horrible in my house, but I'm taking notes as you're writing, or as you're reading. And I wanted to jump in with something completely sort of not relevant. And I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this before, but it just hit me because you do something that I sort of do the same way. Where do you get the names of your characters from? Because they are amazing and they're just perfect. And I'm just sitting here like Granada and Petunia. I don't know, like what leads you in the direction? Where do you get your names from for your characters?
Well, I know I met a pit bull named Petunia at some point. And I have no idea what human that pit bull was attached to, because that shows you how much I pay attention to dogs. So I know I met a Petunia the pit bull in Charlotte somewhere, probably outside of like the Penguin or some bar or something like that. But a lot of times I don't name right away in the story. I wait until I kind of figure out the voice of this character. So I tend to just have like a placeholder name or just a she or whatever, depending on what point of view it's in. And then I kind of try to match it to the story. And I like weird names. So for me, the weirder, the better. And I felt like Grenada would be good for that story because of the whole sort of wanting it to be tropical kind of feel. Mm-hmm. And I think too, you hear a lot in the South, people naming big grand names in real low circumstances. And I've always been fascinated by that. And I try to mimic that too when I'm writing.
That's, I love it. And I've just been wanting to tell you that for a while, that there are no boring names in any of your stories. And names, I don't know, like you said, I think they're important. I think they're especially, well, they're important everywhere. But in the South, you're right. There's so much history and legacy and wanting something bigger by a certain name that you just capture that in your work. And
Lord songs, I pull stuff from songs all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, Jolene, come on.
Oh, no. I mean, I had never really thought about that. I mean, I go through the Bible, which is sort of weird. Yeah. But that's kind of how I get a lot of my names. And yeah, songs too. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, well, music is part of my process. So I don't even know if I do that consciously all the time. It just sort of seeps in. So.
Wait, now, I've never actually asked you this. Can you write to music?
Oh, yeah. I can't write without. Yeah. I can't write without it.
Music that has lyrics?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. I'm like the exact opposite. I just cannot handle any kind of like, I can barely do music. I could never do anything with lyrics in it. So.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with a musician. My sibling was a guitarist, and I think that has a whole lot to do with it. So, yeah.
That just made me think about, okay, kind of random, but so my real dad was a drummer in a band. And when my parents split up when I was real young, my mom decided she hated music, and there was never music in the house because, you know, if you're playing that music, you're going to turn out like, you know, just trash like your daddy kind of thing. So I wonder if like somehow psychologically, that's why I, you know, can't necessarily write to music.
It's got to be part of it. Oh, sorry, my dog's barking.
Well, they're kenneled right now because I'm sure there'll be lots of barking and squawking soon. So, okay, this is a big question.
Okay.
But so we started out with a small one, but okay, this kind of goes into a little bit what we were talking about with names, but you are, to me, and you know this, you know, sort of the quintessential short story writer. I recommend your work to everyone. I mean, there is not, in my mind, another contemporary short story writer that's doing what you're doing that just nails it like you do. But coming from primarily I'm a novelist and I write some short stories, but I see everything in longer form. What has pushed you towards writing short stories and even flash fiction as opposed to working, just going straight to, you know, writing a novel to begin with? What made you embrace your genre?
Well, I think I wanted to be a novelist, and I think I'm exact opposite of you. I have a real hard time lingering in things. So I've got this super anxious energy all the time, and I get bored really easily. So, okay, I'm a Gemini with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So just diving into that long form becomes really, really hard for me. And I think because I tend to write so about such heavy stuff and such dark stories, I feel like I need to get out of them sooner rather than later a lot of times. And I think that's part of it. But part of it too is I've tried 4 or 5 different novels, and just when you get to the point which you can work through, I get mad and tell it to go over there and think about what it's done, and then go back to writing my short stories where I feel much more in control of what I'm doing. Like I guess it would be like a painter who is used to working with acrylics going over to watercolor and going, what the heck is this? So I think that's part of it. And also I studied with some fantastic short story writers like Sherry Flick. I've studied a lot with Kathy Fish and Nancy Stolman, and you know, who you read and who you study with, I think makes a difference too. I love novels. I would love to be able to do what you do, but I'm not sure I can. Maybe I'll be like George Saunders, and after, you know, a nice 25-year short story career, he wrote Lincoln in the Bardo. But you know, I used to feel like I wasn't a real writer unless I did. But I think I've gotten comfortable and happy with what I'm doing with my genre, and there's more room to play with form and structure the shorter you get. Because when you start doing really wild things with a novel, especially when you think about the time investment, it's like, well, who's going to read this?
Hey,
right?
Thanks.
No, I'm talking about like if you start doing crazy stuff with structure, you know, like I love all of that stuff, but it gets to be a smaller and smaller audience. But the main thing is, I don't know if I can. Like, I don't know if my brain can do that. That's the main reason.
Well, no, and it's so, because I'm looking at that from completely the other side of the Alice in Wonderland mirror, and just thinking like, when I read a short story that just bowls me over in like 2 pages, that kind of power, like I want to be able to do that. And I see, like, I'm looking on the other side of like, I can write a novel, but I cannot put that kind of power into like words where everyone is sort of like this bullet, the way you write. And I just think it's neat that the way the first thing you kind of went to was your personality.
Yeah.
That's what shapes it though. And that's sort of, this is something I've been thinking about, you know, like, are people innately a certain type of writer or not, and where that goes?
Well, I think there's a real sense of anxiety with trying to do novel stuff for me. I mean, there's always anxiety, but it's way worse. The only thing worse is poetry. Like that would give me the most anxiety, especially because you know, some of my best friends are poets. One of them sitting in the room with me.
Ah, wait, so Jim or Aubrey?
It's Jim.
Well, but now, especially in, I think it was Barbarella, your stories, I mean, they were very linked, and they're linked in this, you know, in Deadheading in some ways. So it's going, like, the big story is going on in your mind in a way that sort of novels work. I don't know.
Well, I do think that there's a point where what's happening with polyphonic novels and linked stories overlaps. And I think the lines get very blurry. And, you know, I think it was Kirkus Reviews said that I Am Barbarella was a novel in stories, but I was like, no, it's linked short stories. And then it's like, well, what's the difference?
Yeah.
I don't know. What is the difference?
We're just the writers. We don't know.
Yeah.
I let the other people make up the genres. And well, when you were talking about Sherry Flick and Kathy Fish, who I know tangentially, and they're amazing. And I want to give you a chance to sort of shout out some other people as well, not to put you on the spot, but
Sure.
One of the things that I admire about you and about Jim and Aubrey is this sense of a writing community that you are hugely a part of and have built in so many ways. So I was wondering if you had, you know, I don't necessarily want to be like, tell me who inspired you to write. And I mean, maybe it was your first grade teacher and she was amazing, but I'm thinking of, you know, people around you as you're becoming a writer and as you've worked on Deadheading, you know, who's really supported you and, you know, whether like actually supported you or inspired you in some way. Who can you kind of give some shout outs to the people that are watching and want to pick your brain for that?
Well, sure. My partner in crime over here, who I'm collaborating on a hybrid collection, Jim Warner. We're almost finished with it. He inspires me, and he inspired me to work in this hybrid field, which is completely uncomfortable. He's embarrassed over here. That's funny. He doesn't want me to turn the camera on him, so I won't. But yeah, we're working on a collection together. His wife, Aubrey, who is also my partner in crime, is an incredible poet. And she will be reading with me tomorrow night with a novel idea on Passyunk. And I highly recommend everyone come hear her yell at the camera. It's amazing. And KB Carl is a fantastic flash fiction writer, up and coming. She does not have a book yet, and she absolutely should. I was in a class with her this winter under Nancy Stolman, and she is working on this incredible, dark, twisted, like with death as a character,
Cool.
flash novel, and it is so good. I can't wait for her to finish it and to share it with the world. But her stories in and of themselves are incredible. So that's just a few people. You know, I could probably go for an hour just talking about all the people I admire, but those are a few off the top of my head that have been really inspirational the last few years.
Well, let me ask you this then, and hopefully we can get a link to the other authors that you mentioned, because I'm already dying to read this, you know, flash fiction writer. Tell me her name again that you were in a workshop with. KB
Carl.
Okay. But why is it important to have a writing community? I didn't actually read the whole Bad Art Friend
New York
Times thing.
Yeah.
But it was all over the place, and people talk about all the time how writers are either awesome and all together, which most that I know are like that, but the other ones are backbiting and there's always scandal and everything. But you have created and you are part of such a supportive writing community. Why is that important?
Because this field is tough, man. It's tough. I mean, you're just getting the crap kicked out of you just about every day. I really am, and most people probably wouldn't see this unless they know me really well. I really am an optimist at heart. Yes, I have all these mental health things, but that's, you know, what life has done to me. But I really am an optimist at heart, and I want to see the best in people. And when people show you who they are, you know, you believe them. And I have a lot of trust issues, but the people that I've really considered my community, especially the last 10 years, and more so even the last 5 since the first book came out. When you connect over your writing first, like you and I connected first through our writing. Jim and I connected first with our writing. He actually published a story of mine when one of my first publications, it was maybe 3rd or 4th, when he was working at Quiddity. But I had already read some of his work at another journal. So that's kind of where all this started. And like, it's odd how this little circle kind of overlaps. And it's like, I remember being at one of the big conferences, for those that don't know, called AWP, where you were. I think that was when it was in Tampa, I guess.
Yeah.
And I saw you and Jared Yates Sexton talking.
Yes.
And came over and we were all like, we all know it. You know each other. You know each other. And it was just like, what? Of course we know each other.
No, it's so crazy. And since then, I mean, Jared's one of my, I would say, best friends now. And we like met at AWP at like a bar that we were all at. And I don't know, it's really cool. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was such a just come back to Florida already. Just come hang out. Okay, so tricky question, and share what you will. But you are so good at being real and honest about these things. And I just think that, especially when I was really beginning to be published and beginning to be an author, I just soaked up everything real that people said about this life and this process. And so I kind of wanted to throw at you, how do you survive having a book come out? And this is not your first book, but I just, somehow the other day I started thinking about when my first like sort of big-ish novel, Lightwood, came out. And I went to North Carolina and I was on my first like tour. And I so clearly remember being in Wilmington in a hotel and just crying on the bathroom floor. And then I went like the next morning and had coffee with Taylor Brown, who's an amazing author and novelist. And I told him that, and he's like, well, you did what everyone did. You just cried on the bathroom floor at your first book tour. So, and that made me feel like, okay, I'm not a total loser. This is something that we go through. And as you being an incredibly strong person and writer, how are you navigating this? And especially in COVID times and doing this online, what's it like for you?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I think it's something that isn't talked about enough, because most of us, when we get to that point, feel like there's something wrong with us for feeling so exposed and so vulnerable. And like, I mean, honestly, I just want to go hide in the woods most of the time. Like, I think it's part of who we are. We're doing our work alone in a room. And that's probably where most of us are most comfortable. Not all, but is wrestling with whatever's on the page. And I can be vulnerable all day long on that page, alone in a room by myself, with the dogs. But to be vulnerable like that, face to face, whether it's on the screen or in person, is a completely different thing. And there's all these expectations that go along with it. And people who may not be friends exactly, but who are in the literary world, there's a real big, you should just be happy idea. Like, look what you have. You should be so happy and you should be grateful. Well, to me, I don't believe in black and white thinking. I believe that particularly for artists, and particularly for artists with mental illness, you can be grateful and excited and terrified and anxious at the same time. And I feel like if we talked about that more, maybe it wouldn't be as much of an isolating experience, because it does feel very isolating, because you can't really like the people in your family are like, they don't know what you're doing to begin with half the time. They're like, oh, you won an award? That's nice, honey. But, you know, non-writers typically don't know what's going on. I will explain it as, well, this person is writer famous when I'm trying to explain what is happening. And then they go, oh, well, what are you? I'm like, not writer famous. But, you know, I don't know any other way to be other than to just talk about it. And that comes from, you know, I've been fortunate enough to have good health insurance from my husband's jobs, which are much more stable than the writer, teacher, editor life. And I've got, you know, I've had some good therapists along the way who help keep me grounded. But I think it was Matt Bell who did a thread not too long ago. Author of Appleseed is his.
It's great.
Book. Oh, it's so good. And he did a thread about kind of doing like instructions on how not to flip out, I think, when you have a book come out. And it was actually pretty good. It was something to the effect of always be working on something new, because it's the work for us that matters. And to connect with other people who have books coming out around the same time, so we can scream into the void together. And I thought that was pretty good advice too. And like what you did with Taylor, I think, you know, being able to talk to people who've been through these experiences helps to know that it's not just you. And yeah, most of us are freaking out, even if they don't ever say it, even if they're just cool as a cucumber. I'm sorry, they're freaking out.
Yeah.
At least a
No,
little.
and I really wanted to, that was like the first question I actually wrote down when I was taking notes earlier, because there are a lot of things in the writing world and the author world that people don't talk about. And
it's true,
because we're all trying to be cool, or, you know, we're all trying to have everyone else think we're cool, or we want to be successful or perceived a certain way. So we don't talk about, you know, the crazy anxiety you feel right before you do a reading, or the sadness you feel even though you just had your book come out, and all those things. And I'm glad that the authors that I love and respect do talk about it, but I think we need to put it out there even more.
Yeah. I agree. And I'll quote one of my favorite characters, played by one of my all-time favorite actors, Philip Seymour Hoffman, playing Lester Bangs in Almost Famous. I'm uncool. I already know I'm uncool. It's okay. I can't project cool. It's just not going to happen.
You know, it's so weird. I was actually thinking about that movie, Almost Famous, the other day, because there's this line in there where Penny Lane talks about going to the record store and finding your friends. And I mean, it's so famous, but every time I go to a bookstore, that's exactly what it feels like to me. Every time I walk into a bookstore, and I'm sure every author and writer right now is nodding like, yep, but we do that. We walk in and you always look for your friends and people I haven't spoken to in years. I see their book and it's like, you just like touch them in a way. And those are your friends. And it's like, I don't know. I'm grateful that there is this amazing writing community.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I love it when people who I love send me pictures of books in the wild and stuff like that. And when I see like your books or Jared's or Jim's, you know, it's the same. I'm like, oh, yay.
But then I always get in trouble because I always like move the book out and I'm going to put it back, but I move it out to take a picture. And there's always some disgruntled bookseller who they're mostly amazing, but there's always somebody that comes behind me or someone, you know, shopping. And it's like, that doesn't go there. And I'm just like, I'm taking a picture.
Yeah, you gotta put it back though.
So I do, and I really do, but it's just funny that, you know, I spend a lot of time taking pictures of my friends' books and I get a lot of weird looks and sort of, you know, I do that at my local library, which is very, very small. And I'm pretty sure they have no idea who I am. And I don't know why they would. Although I have rearranged my books into the right section. And then they figured it out, I guess. But every time I go in, I go to the new book section and I pull out my friends' books and take pictures. And I'm pretty sure they think I'm like a serial killer
Oh
who's
no.
like targeting these people because they never say anything to me, but I get really weird looks.
And you're not
So,
checking the books out either. They're like,
no, well, because most of the time I've already read them. So then they're even like more weirded out.
I love that story.
It's just, I'm just like, hi, whatever. But which is also completely kind of random, but I really, really, really hope that Deadheading gets into lots of libraries, because as much as I love to buy my friends' books, I love to check them out at libraries. And so, of course, I'm also that person that checks out my friend's book at a library and then is like, yes, so I was talking to her the other day, like trying to like let that person know that I know this amazing author, and nobody ever pays attention to me, but I try.
I would.
Okay, so actually we've got plenty of time. If anyone has questions and you want to go ahead and start putting them out there, Beth and I could probably talk all night long. I mean, especially if we started on like animals, and then God knows where we'd go from there. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can go from there. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there before we go way off on a tangent. But okay, so next thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's like timing perfect and everything. We've talked a lot about, what we have over a couple of different readings, you and I, about what you are interested in and what you write about. What's inspiring you now? Like, I mean, you wrote Deadhead, probably wrote all the stories 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, I finished the draft I sent that won the award in like February 2019. So yeah, it's
not too far.
Yeah. So I'm working on 2 longer projects, and then, short stories all along the way, and essays too, which, oh Lord help me. Essays too, though that it's not my preference. It's much harder for me to write essays and be in the quote unquote real world. But the first is a novel in Flash. Again, I don't know if you want to call it a novel or linked stories, but all the chapters will be under 1,000 words. And
oh wow,
it's really playing with form and structure. I described it as Steel Magnolias meets Bluettes.
What?
to one of my friends, and she thought that was hilarious.
That's
awesome. Yeah, I don't really know what it is. It's weird. It takes place in a former mill town, which has reinvented itself as a holiday destination, which, if, as you know me, sounds not like something I would write, but it's like the opposite of a Hallmark movie. The people who live there are not thrilled about the fact that their town
this does sound like you.
Yeah, is not thrilled that their town is like this holiday destination, and it's more about the family you choose rather than the family you're born to. So I think it's got a lot of really cool different generation women connecting and finding their way through some hardship. So that's my wheelhouse for sure. The holiday thing, maybe not, but it's weird and I don't know where it's going, but I'm probably 2/3 of the way through that. I did a lot this winter. This was a heavier winter than I'm used to, being from North Carolina, and now I'm in Kentucky. So I got a lot written over the winter. And then the other project I'm working on, as I mentioned before, is a collaborative project with Jim Warner, the poet. And it is a collection of high bun about, I think it's a conversation between us about our youth, sort of coming of age in the punk hardcore scene in the 90s. And
That's awesome.
it's
wow.
all inspired by that music. And we are very close to finishing that and sending it out. So that will be really fun to promote and perform when it gets picked up. I'm not going to say if. So.
No, when. It's got to happen. I mean, that was my whole 90s experience right there. I want this book now. Well, we actually have a question. I feel kind of like a game show host now, getting to do this.
I love it.
But this is actually a really, really good one. So Patricia, she had 2 questions. But one, she wanted to start off with, what is your writing process like? She says, could you talk about your writing process? And then what's some valuable advice you've received from mentors? And those are really good.
So my process, I am not a planner, probably why I don't write novels. Again,
as I have the whiteboards behind me. So.
It's so bizarre because in all other areas of my life, I prefer planning and pretty hardcore structure. And part of that's to mitigate anxiety. But when I sit down to write, I need to be surprised. I need to have no idea where I'm going. And that to me feels very mysterious and mystical. And I don't always know where stuff comes from. I like to really trust my intuition, which works really well in short stories, I think. It also probably causes me a lot more work and revision. I recognize this, but it feels more like play when I work that way. However, like I said, my process, I'm sort of the chaos monster when it's time to sit down to write, but everything that prepares me to do that is very, very structured. So I have to have a walk, at least an hour walk every day before I write. I write usually 5 days a week. Not always, but usually 5 days a week. I have learned that my brain works best between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. If I get stuck, I can roll out of bed and trick my brain, grab the coffee, try not to look at my phone, and just go into writing. But I only do that if I have to, because I'm not a morning person and I just hate it. But some really weird stuff comes about right when you wake up. So I find the internal critic is still asleep. So it gives you more freedom. So I don't know. I think it's a little weird. How about you, Steph? What's your process?
Well, no, I was just nodding to that because if I'm like writing a first draft, I have to write first thing in the morning. I mean, after like a cup of coffee, but for that same reason, because otherwise, if I like were to start at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, my internal critic would be going. I'd be thinking about the whole day. I have to do that first thing in the morning if I want it to just come out like raw like that. I also think it's funny that you're like, I'm not structured, but between the hours of 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. after I do my 1 hour walk.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, it makes no sense. The whole, everything around it is very structured, but the actual, there's no outline, there's no plan, there's music.
It's almost like you create this very structured playground to then be able to play in. But no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense when you think about it that way.
I'm laughing because that's how I played as a kid. And I never thought about that until
wow.
I was very organized in my chaos.
I can see that. So how about like one big piece of advice or important advice or something that you're just thinking about right now that's come from one of your mentors?
I think the biggest thing for me, and this was going through my MFA program at Chatham, and that is, and it's a tough one, and I think it plays into the bad art friend thing, but I think it comes to knowing who your actual friends are and who has your best interests at heart. But don't listen to everything you learn or you hear in workshop, because not everyone has your best interests at heart. And people are reading with their own agenda. So you learn, if you continue in workshop type environments, you learn when something doesn't connect with you and when it doesn't. And I think that's a big thing. You can, if someone offers a critique, you can say, well, that person has no idea where I'm coming from. They clearly don't understand what I'm shooting for. So why does their opinion about this first draft I just handed in along with my heart, why does that need to upset me or curtail what I'm doing? And that I think is the biggest thing I learned from mentors at Chatham. And that's a huge one, because it's tough. It's tough, even with reviews and things like that. It's the same. It's like, okay, well, this person is very, very different from me and clearly didn't have the experience that I had hoped they would have, but you let it go. You have to.
Well, how do you hold on to like being true to yourself then, as you write and as you move through the writing and workshop experience? How do you kind of just, because you do that so well, it's like you rip your, go into your heart and you just like use your, I don't even know how to explain it, but you can see that in your writing, that you're blocking everyone else out and you're really putting your heart on the page. How do you do that?
I don't know, other than it's been hard won. It's taken a long time to get there because it was not always that way. I mean, my first workshop, again, talking about crying on the floor, my very first workshop, which was probably an undergrad, I was sobbing in the bathroom stall in the middle of class. Like I had to leave. It was, I don't have a good poker face, but actually Jim and I were talking about that shortly before we got on here. And I think it's like, I allow myself to feel crappy for a certain amount of time. Like, all right, you've got one day to feel like crap, and you just feel those feelings, because I mean, you can't really shove things down. I mean, you can, but it's going to come out other ways. And for me, it's going to come out in anxiety, which is going to keep me from writing. So I've, just over the years, I've developed all right, feel crappy today, and tomorrow you get up and go to work.
I feel like that should be a life motto for everything. I may have to get that tattooed on me, like, like right here or something. Beth Gilstrap. But another awesome question from a different Rebecca, but this is such a big one because we're usually like, we don't get stuck as writers. Yeah, we do. So Rebecca Porsche was asking, how do you sort of move past it when you get stuck as a writer? What do you? I'm really excited to hear your structured / not structured routine for this.
It is structured. It's so funny. Okay, so I have a very specific philosophy.
I'm writing this down right now.
If I can't write, I read. If I can't read, I send work out because it doesn't take the same brain power. If I can't do that, I will seek out other art forms, because I believe that all art is in communication. So like Friday, I was exhausted from, book launch week and feeling pretty depleted after finishing a really big, hard essay. And I went to a new exhibit at the Speed Art Museum here in Louisville. And it's all about the supernatural. So it's very timely with spooky season. And it actually, I think, may have inspired me to pick up a novel that I worked on for 5 years and, and try to start working on that one again, because it's about visionary artists. So visual artists who make art with the help of spirits, or so they claim.
Oh, there's somebody whose name is like hitting me right. Helen. We're going to talk about this later, because there is someone who's a theophist. Is in like 1890 that I'm going to send your way information on her, because it's right up there. And I saw an exhibit of hers in New York a couple years ago, and it was incredible.
Yeah, and it's a big thing in the South. Particularly self-taught artists. And I'm very interested in who gets to define when something's art. So I'm really interested in that.
So who does?
Yeah,
that's beyond fascinating.
It depends who you ask, right?
You and I have never actually talked about like visual art and other types of art, and that just, I don't know. I'm like super excited to hear like your thoughts on that, and I hope you write an essay on that, because I don't know. That's a good direction. Now I'm just excited. See, this is what happens when we talk for this long. Now I'm all just like excited about everything that you're doing.
So what do you do when you get stuck?
Kick a tree. That's what my husband tells me to do when I get very like about stuff. But kind of like what you were talking about with having to move, like I will go for a walk. Like there's lots of people that say like there's no such thing as writer's block, and I'm like, well, you're cool, because everyone experiences it, and you can write your way through it, push your way through it, but sometimes I just have to just get up from the page and walk away. And like you, in a lot of ways, I'm very like writing is everything and art is everything, and then it gets all wrapped up. And so I have to have moments where I'm like, okay, I have to go do something normal. Like, let me go scoop up a bunch of chicken shit in the chicken coop, because it has nothing to do with art or writing or being a poet or an author or an artist, but it still has to be done.
I do the same thing with the garden, with the dogs, my cats. I cook, same thing.
Weeding. Actually, deadheading. Because I have a huge rose garden and I do that all the time. And it's funny, someone else, I think it was at your launch party, had posted in the chat, like, I think of you every time I'm deadheading my garden. Oh, and I do that every time I'm like out there deadheading my rose bushes. I'm thinking about you. So it's like your book is a total brainworm.
Oh, yay. You're welcome, universe.
Exactly. It's all coming down.
Well, hello.
Hello, Patricia.
Hi. I wanted to quickly jump in because we're getting to the top of the hour. And I know you've both had a book or two that you wanted to mention. But let me see, Steph, did you have anything else that you wanted to say or to cover with Beth before we move to that last part?
I would just urge everyone that's listening to this or comes back and hears about it to please check out Beth's work and her earlier work as well. I get excited talking to her, and I don't do this when I'm always, talking and interviewing other writers or whatever. I love her work, like genuinely, even if we weren't friends. I would absolutely be gaga over her short stories because she writes like no one else. So if you're in any way, interested in being inspired by this conversation, please check out Deadheading, go back, check out No Man's Wild Laura and I Am Barbarella, because I have never yet read a sentence by Beth and been disappointed. And I mean, that's like something, and that's like why I again admire her so much as a short story writer, because it's in every word and you will never be disappointed by her words. So
I feel the same about your novels, Steph. And there was a big article about Southern fiction recently, and there are also women writing Southern fiction, and two of them are here. So
we talk about, okay, Beth and I, and we should bring in like Megan as well, and like have a whole like female Southern author front porch chat at some point, because
and Jen Fox too.
Yes.
I think having an event with you all tomorrow night, if I'm not mistaken. Tales the Devil told me.
Oh, so good. Good.
What was this article about, Beth? That Southern fiction or Southern writers?
Oh, it was a big article in a big fancy paper who talked about Southern fiction writers today. And it was, and don't get me wrong, I like the authors they mentioned very much, but they only mentioned 3 men writing short fiction. And I think sometimes the women get lost in the shuffle, particularly in conversations about Southern fiction. So,
what do you think that is?
Well, the old boys network. I don't know. I mean, I think the genre is heavily loaded toward men. And anytime I've asked somebody and gotten into a conversation with people just on a personal basis, I can say, well, can you name a Southern woman writer who's not Flannery O'Connor? And most of them can't, and most of them certainly haven't read others, living or dead.
Well, I know my colleague Stephanie is going to just shake her head at this, but I smell a podcast. I think you got to do it. Well, that and many other things, of course. So let's just talk for just a moment. Like, what's a book that you think, Beth, that everybody needs to check out and get their hands on?
Well, last year when I moved here, I was going through a lot of hard personal stuff. And the first thing I read and was really able to sink into after this period and some of the pandemic stuff is called Heartberries. And it's by Therese Marie Mayhot. I'm not sure if I have the pronunciation of her last name, but she is an Indigenous author. And it was one of the most incredible memoirs I've ever read. And I highly, highly recommend it. I'll drop the link in the chat.
Thank you.
Sure.
Steph, do you have one?
I have so many, but so what I did when you mentioned this earlier, I just went and grabbed the book that I'm reading right now, because it's by an absolutely just incredible author friend, and that's what Beth and I have been talking about so much. So I'm currently reading In the Wild Light by Jeff Zettner. It's actually young adult, but the way Jeff writes is so resonating about sort of the human experience. Jeff Zettner is a Tennessee writer, and he is also just sort of the person you want to talk to when you are beyond stressing about writing. And he mentors kids about this as well. And reading this book right now, even though it's not necessarily the genre I write in, it's just like heart stabbing in a way, just about growing up and, navigating becoming an adult. And so you should definitely check out all of Jeff Zettner's books, but right now particularly In the Wild Light.
We did an author event with Jeff for that book, and he was in conversation with Stephanie Perkins.
Oh, yay!
So everybody, if you're interested and you're going to take these recommendations from these authors to heart, check out Malaprop's YouTube page, and you can see that conversation and many more, and then ultimately this one at some point, so you can savor what has turned out to be not just a great conversation between friends, but clearly one in which, Steph, you are a fan, a supporter, a close reader, a person who really is, I can't think of anybody else who is better poised to talk to Beth this evening. And yeah, are we ever going to look at Deadheading the same way again? No, And that's what the author does, is take an action or an idea or a person and then make us reconsider it. And I think, Beth, you've certainly done that with these stories and just with sharing your experiences about being an author and your process. I think we're all the better for it. And Steph, the two of you really elicited those great comments and ideas, and we're always appreciative of that. I want to thank you both for being here this evening. Congratulations, Beth, on your latest work that we're celebrating this evening, Deadheading, right? Deadheading and Other Stories. And yet prizes are important. I'm sorry, I know this is not the Golden Globes, but prizes are important. And we appreciate that. I'm not Ricky Gervais, but congratulations, Beth. We look forward to your writing more. And Steph, you as well. Please join us again. Thank you, audience, for being here and for your questions. We really appreciate that. Join us again. Go to malaprops.com to look at our upcoming events. Thank you, everyone, and be well.